Okay, great. So now we're bearing down on the homework. We're now going to look at what we might call a mixed structure. Earlier, just to cut our teeth, we were looking at a list of lists, or a list of dictionaries, a dictionary of dictionaries, and those were good and convenient ways, believe it or not, to represent tabular data. But let's go back to our more mixed structure. That is the structure that we originally started with, this whole idea that a single key might point to multiple values within a column. As I described before, we have a student ID, and we want to associate that ID with a bunch of one-to-one information, like the first name, the last name. But then we also want to associate that string key with a many-to-one relationship. So we want to be able to say that any one of these students might have multiple courses associated with them, and we want to be able to represent that data faithfully. Faithfully meaning in a way that is consistent with how it's actually structured, because it's a many-to-one relationship. You can see the first student has 3 courses, the second one has 2, the third one has 2. You don't know how many there are going to be, and basically if you don't know how many there are, we probably want to use a list or a set to represent them. We're using a list because it's kind of like the go-to, and set is used only when you really need to make use of its uniqueness or membership qualities, abilities. So, okay, the big question for this particular example is, how could you loop through the courses? And in fact, even going further, how could you loop through each ID and then for each ID loop through the courses? So we can begin by trying to just loop through the courses for, let's say, for Mr. Kane. I only have LName here because I want to keep it simple, but you can see how complicated this can get. What would I need to do to loop through the courses for Mr. Kane? And then we will follow up by saying, well, let's loop through every ID in this dictionary. And for each one of those IDs, we can loop through the courses. And so we're going to list out each person's ID, possibly their last name, and then the courses that are assigned to them. That's going to be a bit of a challenge. Actually, let's begin by just printing, let's print Go. Let's begin by printing Go. That'll be your first challenge. We want to print the word Go from DOD. Obviously, that means we're going to have to find the address, and the address is now nested 2 layers deep. So see if you can figure out a way, without doing much guessing, how to print the word Go. The only Go there is under Everett, AXE99. I'm going to pause it right now. You pause it and see if you can figure it out. Okay, we want to print Go. So remember the rule. If you want to access an inner structure, I'll just say it again just so that we can repeat it and be real clear on it. If you want to, or shall say to access an inner structure, find the address of that structure, find its address in the outer structure. All right. So what's the address? We're headed towards Go, aren't we? And this is, as I said, we're going to have to go 2 layers deep. How do I get to the dictionary that holds the list that holds Go? Well, I need to use AXE99 as a key, obviously. So if I were to print DOD AXE99 with a subscript, I should see the dictionary that holds the list. Great. Okay. That's the address of that. And I do recommend when you're doing this to try to allow yourself to go step by step in so that you can see what you've got, which is always a good rule of thumb anyway. Now that we have that inner dictionary LName, how are we going to get to the inner list that has Go in it? Well, that's under courses, isn't it? So we should be able to do a second subscript. And when we do that, we should then see the list for Go and Python. And now, how are we going to print Go? Well, it's the first item in that dictionary, that list. So we'll just print the first item, and that's how we can get go. So a triple subscript this time, but using the exact same set of principles and rules. To access an inner structure, find the address in the outer structure. Use that address to get to the inner structure. Then, if you have to go even further deep, find the inner structure within that outer structure and keep going as you drill down to find what you're looking for. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge would be to loop through, and let's just loop through. We could begin by looping through and printing each name. That would be a good interim puzzle. So do that first. Pause the tape and see if you can loop through and just print each last name. Okay, coming back, I'm going to say for key in DoD. But what is the key? It's a student ID, isn't it? Don't forget, when you're looping through DoD, you're not looping through the dictionary, the inner dictionary. You're not getting a dictionary with each one. You're getting a string key. So this is the student ID. All right, so for student ID in DoD, I'm just going to go at it incrementally, which is what you should do. I'm going to print each student ID. Now I want to access the inner dictionary for each one. So I'm going to go back to DoD and say DoD subscript stu ID. Again, I don't know if this was clear to you in our last challenge, but when you, or the challenge before, but when you're looping through a dictionary, and you want to get to an inner value within the dictionary, you're going to have to use the key. For the key in the dictionary, print DoD key. That's going to get you the inner structure. Now, if we print that out, we should see each inner structure. Okay. Now we want to print each last name. So we could just say LNAME at this point. Great. Okay. Now what we'd like to do is perhaps loop through the courses for each dictionary. Now, I think it should be pretty clear that if LNAME got us Kane or Everett or Bosco, then courses is going to get us each of the course names. It should allow us to see each list. What we're saying is for each string key in DoD, get the value, DoD stu ID, which is that whole dictionary, and then from that dictionary, get the courses list. This is why we're saying DoD stu ID courses. Now, if our purpose is to loop through each one, here's what we're not going to want to do. And this is what some students do in the homework, because you're going to do something that's very similar to what we're asking for in the homework. What some students do is they say, okay, well then I will print subscript 0, I will print subscript 1, I will print subscript 2. The big problem with that is that not every list has the same number of items. So doing it this way isn't going to work. There is no third item in this list. So we can't use that process. We're not going to use that process. DoD stu ID courses is a list. How do you loop through a list? With for, right? DoD stu ID courses is a list. I'll say it again. DoD stu ID courses is a list. Do you want me to say it again? DoD stu ID courses is a list. It's a list. If it's a list, you can loop through it. So I can say for course in DoD stu ID courses, which as you know is a list. We'll print the course. And we should see all the courses for all the people listed out. Now that might not be that helpful if we don't give it some identifying information. So we might want to, let's say, maybe print the ID first. So maybe I'll say something like this. And then maybe inside this, I'll go ahead and add a couple of spaces so that it's indented. And now you can see that AXE has Go and Python. JK43 has Python, Java, and C, and JAB has Python and JavaScript. That's really what we were after there. To be able to loop within a list that's inside another container. And that is the challenge in the homework. May as well just look straight at the homework right now. Actually, I'll do that in the next lesson.